So if it runs out of time on me, we'll restart it.
Okay.
What we're going to go through today is the timeline for when you're working with someone who's buying new construction.
Oh, good.
So yesterday we went over the basic timeline for a built standing home. New construction, there are some unique steps to it. So we're going to be working on to-be-built homes today. First thing is that there are some steps that we recommend you take before you meet with the builder. Go on the builder's website, and if you can, through the website, register yourself and your client. The website's also going to give you the information on how to schedule an appointment to meet with the builder rep. The primary reason we recommend that is not all builders allow their reps to sell in all of their developments. Some builders, if you want to go see a particular development, only the agents assigned to that development know that development and can do a sale there. So you can have a buyer who's interested in more than one development by the same builder, but you're going to have to schedule appointments with different contacts. Typically, those appointments are held at a model home or at a sales office that's attached to a model home, and that's where you would meet your clients. This also gives you a chance to research the builder's product models, and you can send the website to your buyer so they can look at what models there are, where they're, what the basic price points are for different models, and where there are lots available. Builders that are on top of it will keep their website pretty current, especially with lots and which lots are available, so that you don't have people coming in asking about a lot that's been sold. If you can, the other thing that we recommend, if you can get the builder's rep to provide it, is a copy of the purchase contract for you to be able to review. If the builder's rep isn't going to provide it, we have a lot of the production builders like Ivory, Edge, those type of builders. We have copies of their contract here in digital form. That it's a good idea to review that before you go in, so that if you have any questions as an agent, you're prepared to ask those questions, because your buyer oftentimes won't think of the questions. And the types of questions that are going to come up are going to be, is it earnest money or is it a deposit? If it's earnest money, is it refundable in the case of cancellation? If it's a deposit, is it refundable or is it considered spent money? What the estimated time of completion is. If it's a quick move in, that could be fairly short. If it's building from ground up, it's going to take a while. So the steps we're going to look at today are going to be as if you were building from ground up. If you hear me refer to a QMI or a quick move in, that's a model that the builder already determined all of the options and is in the process of building and figures they're within 60 to 90 days of completion. Now they'll start marketing it as mostly complete. And so a lot of the initial steps, the buyer's not part of. So they need to be aware that if they're looking at homes on a builder's website and it shows it as quick move in, this is a unit that may be close to completion or may already be completed. Occasionally quick move-ins come on where somebody designed the home and then for whatever reasons they had canceled. So now the builder's almost done with a unit and doesn't want it sitting on their books, so they're going to try to sell it as quickly as they can. So see if possible, see if you can get a copy of that contract. If not, like I said, look here in the office. If you have questions, we'll sit down and go through it together. They can be pretty cumbersome. To put it in perspective, Ivory's basic contract is about 17 pages long. And that's just the base contract. Then you start getting all the addenda. This one's in bold because it is absolutely important that you register with the builder. If you can, register yourself and your client prior to being there. Otherwise, at the first meeting, you need to be there to register. And it's fairly simple process. It's usually you fill out a little 3x5 or a little postcard that has the buyer contact information and your contact information and brokerage name. Some will allow, like I said, some will allow you to do it prior to that if possible. The reason for doing that, if you're not able to pre-register with the builder, then go with the initial meeting. If you're not able to be there at the initial meeting, have another agent go with to pre-register, because registering protects your buyer's right to representation and it protects your commission. Just about every builder has a sign on the door of the model home where a buyer would be meeting with the builder representative. If you are not with your agent on the first contact, your agent is not included. That means they are showing up unrepresented and they have no representation to help them through the process. The builder's rep is not there to represent them. The builder's rep is there to represent the builder. At this point, it becomes kind of like buying a used car. You're on your own. And we need to be there to protect our clients' interests. And it may sound mercenary, but it's also, you've worked hard for them. You've worked hard to get them where they are as a buyer. Your commission needs to be protected. Otherwise, they could find themselves under the buyer broker agency agreement. They may find themselves liable to a 3% commission they can't pay. Most builders, after that initial meeting, won't let an agent in. We've had some success with Edge. Edge has been very, as a builder, has been very buyer agent friendly. At that meeting with the builder, you need to plan with a meeting with a builder is much longer than a traditional showing of a built existing home. Because you're going to be meeting with a builder's rep. They're going to have a conversation typically with you and your buyer prior to going to the model home if it's somewhere in the neighborhood, or oftentimes the model home is the sales office prior to walking through the model home, to give them some basic information, some background, look at a map, figure out which lots are available, if they're looking at a townhome versus single family, all of those different types of products. That conversation is going to happen typically before you even look at a home. So you need to plan that. And if the buyer is serious about writing an offer, then you're going to be writing an offer right there as soon as, at that time as well. So be prepared for it. A typical existing home, we schedule a half hour for a showing. Be prepared that if they want to look at a builder, or if they want to see more than one builder in a day, you need about an hour or more to really have time available. It's also a good opportunity for them to drive through the development and see what's going on. If they want to drive out to the lot where that's being built, or to the unit, be prepared to drive through the unit, oftentimes with the representative from the builder. Take a look at the community, what's going on. One of my buyers really liked the community. We drove through. There was a park that looked really odd because it wasn't completed yet, but it was just tree branches sticking out of the ground all over the place, and swings and no grass. It was a dog park. They pre-planned a dog park in the middle of the community, and it was still under construction. And that made sense to them once they saw it. It also gave them you get a sense of access in and out of the community. Sorry, I need to grab something. And in some newer construction areas where the cities are allowing narrower streets, they need to know what parking is going to be like, particularly if they have multiple cars in the family. Is there going to be adequate parking for all of their vehicles in the community? And in the area, or if family or friends come to visit, where are they going to be parked? So they have an idea of that. You need to feel for that walking through. Ultimately, the tour, like most tours, are going to go through a model home of some type. And you need to point out that this is the model. This has all the upgrades. This is all the nice stuff. The base price of the home probably doesn't include that level of finishes. And that's where the sales representative can help with that, help them see this is an upgrade, this is an upgrade, this is an upgrade. If your buyer is prepared to put in an offer and decide that's what they want to do that day, the preparation of the contract is backward from what we're used to. We usually write the offer and then present it to the seller. In this case, 95% of the builders I have worked with use their own contract built by their own legal department. There are a few small local builders that will use the state's contract. So the REPC that the state off the MLS. The contract you use for that depends on the status of the home. If the home is still under construction, you use the REPC for construction. If the home has already been completed and has had the final inspection and certificate of occupancy provided, then you actually just use the standard REPC for real estate, for residential real estate. It's a legal definition that has to be met. But most builders have their own contract, and since their contract belongs to them, their people fill it out. If you've had a chance to look at it in advance and mark notes on it, big thing to look for is immediate deadlines that your clients have to meet. The most common immediate deadlines are deposit or down payment requirements. We'll get into a little bit further on. They may be required to be applying with a preferred lender for pre-approval for the lending. They need to know some deadlines that come up pretty quickly. And be prepared to ask questions. Your buyer also needs to understand that just because they signed the offer and the builder's representative has it, doesn't mean they're under contract. The builder's legal representative still has to sign the contract. And for some large construction companies, some large production companies like a D.R. Horton or Ivory or Richmond or Edge, that's most likely going to be a supervisor. And what can happen is it's a Saturday, 2 or 3 people come into the same sales office, and 2 or 3 people like the same corner lot with the same basic model, and 2 or 3 people could put an offer in on it. So yours may not end up being the one that gets it. When the market was super, super hot, it was not uncommon to see bidding wars even in new construction. We may get back to that someday. So they just need to know that until the legal representative of the company signs it, they're not technically under contract. Typically, the deposit money they put that day is for that sales agent to be able to mark on the board, we have an offer pending on this property. So we're not, as a kind of a warning to the other agents, this one's off market for the time being. And that's what they need to find out. If there's a deposit being paid by the buyer at the time of the offer, is it a deposit or is it earnest money? And that's going to be determined by the contract. Frequently, if you're going ground up, it's the deposit to hold a specific lot that they're putting the offer on. Verify whether or not that deposit is in fact refundable. Some builders, once your buyer signs over that check, it's considered non-refundable. If they change their mind over the weekend and decide that's not the lot they want, they're losing the deposit. If they don't get that lot because of actions by the builder, 2 or 3 people put an offer on the same lot, then it's typically refundable. So they do need to be prepared coming into it with the expectation that they should have their checkbook with them ready to make that deposit. That's a good question to ask the representative prior to going in and meeting with the builder's rep. I've had a few occasions where the buyer needed to know what the amount was because they were going to use a cashier's check, so they still had to drive to the bank, get the cashier's check, and come back. So the builder's rep held the paperwork. Any questions on that so far? Okay, once you get through, the contract has been completed and accepted, then the actual deadlines for when the following steps need to be completed are going to be spelled out in the contract. First is that most large builders work with a preferred lender. Oftentimes it is the lender that's financing the construction, so they've got a working relationship between the two. And they're going to require that by a specific deadline, your buyer, even if they came in with a pre-approval letter from the lender they've been working with since they were in diapers, they're still going to have to fill out an application for pre-approval with the preferred lender. The buyer is not obligated or required to use the builder's preferred lender. Buyer always has the right to choose what lender they want to work with. The builder's lender is going to do everything they can to entice them and provide all kinds of incentives, but the buyers may not recognize that those incentives may be made up in terms of the profit to the lender in other ways, higher fees, higher rates. So yes, they have to do the paperwork. Yes, they have to get the pre-approval. Then it's a good opportunity to take that pre-approval and to their lender and say, look, here's what they're offering. Or they may find out that the $3,000 toward cabinets, they're going to, pay in closing costs. Just leave it alone. Go with your preferred lender. That's their option. From a ground up build, usually the next primary deadline, and it's oftentimes scheduled at the time that you're signing the paperwork, is the time to meet with the design department. So they've already selected a lot they want the home on and the basic model that will fit on the lot. This is the opportunity to they go through, review the basic plans for the home. Here's your base home. What changes do you want to make to it, architecturally and structurally? And here are options. Oftentimes those options are what they want the interior of the home to look like. Here's the 4 different versions of a kitchen. Which one do you want? Base, middle, super expensive. What the exterior or the elevation of the home is going to look like from the outside, so that they don't have all the same homes all lined up side by side. All of those kind of decisions are being made. And any additional costs are then added to the base price that was decided on at the time of the initial contract. And those are all added up and put together, and then an updated addendum is usually signed. Whatever is signed and agreed upon on that design is then what is turned into planning and zoning for the building permit. And if there have been major upgrades, there may be an additional deposit requirement. So they decided to add a 3rd car garage. That may require a deposit. They decided to put in a man door in the garage. That may require a deposit. The oversized kitchen mirror, all those kinds of things could require a deposit on top of what they've already put in as a deposit. The next meeting then is the color and design options. It may be at the same time as the architectural. Oftentimes it's a separate meeting, because architectural, they just want to get the plans ready so the engineers can make sure the plans will work and get it turned in for permitting. Coloring options is then when you go in and start picking out what the home will look like. This one can take a very long time, especially if you have indecisive buyers. They'll start with what the base model finishes for the home are: flooring, lighting, carpeting, colors, kitchen, all of those basic things. Here's your base. Now, if you want this type of upgrade, here's how much it'll be. If you want that upgrade, how much is it going to be? And you keep a running list going with a running total. When that's completed, you've now got the architectural done and all the options, then a final price addendum is created that has, here was your base, here's what you added on architecture, here's what you added on for options, here's your actual new price, total price. So if you have a buyer who's pre-qualified for $600,000 and they go in and pick a $500,000 base model, they've got some room to work. if they've been pre-approved for $600,000 and go in and pick a $580,000 house, there's not a lot of room for options because they've got to stay under what their approval amount is. And again, more options picked, more additional deposit may come up. The amount is entirely up to the contract. So they need to be prepared for that. The fastest color option meeting I've ever been to took 45 minutes. It was a single guy buying a townhome, and there were only 12 color palettes to choose from. He picked out the one he liked, picked out the cabinets he liked. We were in and out of there in 45 minutes. And then a month later, he got transferred for work and had to cancel the contract. The longest I was there 2 hours when I had to leave for another appointment, and they were still arguing over carpet. So it's good to be there to help make sure they don't overspend. Just know that it could take a while. Hold on a second. Hey, Andrea. Okay. All of this stuff goes on before the foundation's even dug. So during this time, if you're talking with someone who's building from ground up, in the contract there's going to be deadlines to meet these, but then there are estimated deadlines after that as to how far they'll be in the project. If the home is a quick move-in, one that's already in process, all of this has already been done. Oftentimes your buyer's walking into, it's like buying an existing home. They're not going to get to have all the oohs and ahs of picking colors. But the last couple of years, more and more builders have eliminated that step in order to control costs. As production of materials changed and supply chain changed. In fact, the young lady you just heard me talking to on the phone, they had ground up, made all kinds of lots of decisions, and then during the building process, tile company quit making the tile they wanted for the kitchen, and the flooring company quit making that style of flooring, and they had to keep remaking decisions and refiguring costs. And so a lot of builders are just skipping that step if they can, especially in townhomes, the condensed homes where they're just building a whole row of them all together, and they're all doing base finishes. They figure once somebody moves in, if they want to change the paint and carpet, do it on their time, do it on the owner's time. Once all of this is done, then the paperwork goes in for the building permit. And this is when your buyer's going to sometimes feel like nothing's happening because paperwork's being shuffled. From the time they sign the contract to when they actually see a foundation dug and poured, could be up to 2 months or longer because they can't start digging until they get the permit. And this becomes their first external sign of progress. This is when they start to get excited again. This is when the soils engineer has to go out there and make sure everything is compacted properly. I did have a buyer had to sign had to receive notice from the builder that there'd be a 1 month delay in construction because they fired the soils engineer because the first batch of houses he passed sunk into the ground and they didn't want to mess with that second time round. And they had a new soils engineer come in and retest all of the dug but not poured foundations, and his failed. And so they had to redo all of the foundation preparation work. His response was he was more than happy to wait a month to make sure his house didn't sink into the ground. A lot of times buyers like to come by and watch and see what's going on or take pictures. They do sign an agreement that it's an active construction zone and access to the lot will be controlled by the builder. If they want to go see it, best time is after work hours when it's not an active work site. And keep in mind you're driving through an active work site at your own risk, particularly for the tires of your cars. But if they want to go take pictures, that's up to them. The next big deadline is what's called the four-way or the four major trades. Now the home has been framed and the skeleton's in place. The HVAC has put in all of the heating and air conditioning systems. All of the electrical lines are roughed in. They're run, but they're not done. They're in boxes. And that electrical also includes the low voltage. So any of your internet cables, anything like that, and all the plumbing lines are run and roughed in. There's a walkthrough you do at that time with the builder representative or usually a building supervisor to make sure everything matches on the rough end what had been planned. This is typically the last chance to make any changes because the drywall is going up next and making changes after that gets super expensive. I've had buyers walk through and look at the kitchen and realize how big the space actually was in real life and that the 4 can lights they planned on wasn't going to be enough. Can we add 4 more? Certainly. Change order at that point. They told it was a set cost per light. Usually there's a nominal fee to do